Hi there, Sandra here from the Schwowin's Nest. Welcome to another episode of Timber Tuesday. My first project is inspired by this ship's wheel that is on Etsy for $114. I found this round sign. It has a glass insert at my Dollarama for $4. And then I found these wood craft rings. They're called floral craft rings at Michael's, and they were $7.99 a piece. So far I'm into this for about 20 bucks. I'm going to use my favorite permanent glue, which is this Weld Bond, and I'm going to put a thin layer on. This glue works best if you don't put a whole bunch on because then it's too slippery. You want to just be able to put on a little bit like I'm doing here and kind of just spread it around. I'm going to set this aside with something heavy on it for a good 15-20 minutes so the glue has a chance to set. I've got these spindles that I cut down from a bed frame, and I'm going to go ahead and use the natural marks here to cut them into the pieces I need for the handles of the ship's wheel. Here they are. They kind of look like little men standing there, and I'm going to give them a head. These are some doll heads that I picked up at Michael's. They were $7.99 for 9 of them, so a little bit pricey, but it is what I needed for this project, so I didn't want to skimp and make it look cheap. Again, I'm using Weld Bond glue and I'm going to glue these on, set them aside, and give them a good chance to dry. These rings are pretty solidly glued together. I'm going to take some of this silicone and fill the holes. It doesn't work out 100% because the silicone kind of shrinks when it dries, so it's okay. It's all I had. I was doing this at my cottage and I forgot to bring my wood filler along or my spackle, so this is going to work in a pinch. Silicone is really difficult to sand because it's got that rubbery texture. So I'm just taking a little piece of scrap wood and going across each hole, just taking off any of the excess. I measured the space I was going to need in between the two circles, and I have this small dowel that I cut into, I think it was like 1.5 or 2.5 inch pieces. I think they were 2.5. Anyway, doesn't matter. You what you've got to do is make sure that you've got the size you need. I'm going to just take some sandpaper and just sand down the rough edges, and then I'll get prepared to glue them in place. Here are those little wood pieces. I've got them set inside where I need them to be, and I'm just going to make sure that they're all nice and even. It was really easy to place them because you can see the floral ring has circles or holes, and there's 8 of them, and that's exactly the number I needed. So I just lined up these little wood pieces with the holes. I'm using hot glue on one end of these little pegs and the Weld Bond glue on the other end so I can easily fit it in. I'll get that quick hold so I can continue working, and the Weld Bond glue will give me a permanent hold. To make sure that these pegs stay put, I'm using these coffee stir sticks. They're like really skinny popsicle sticks and some hot glue, and I'm just going to glue it from one end of the circle frame on top of the peg and then onto the floral frame. And this is going to give all of these pegs a super secure hold so nothing will fall apart. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, I would love for you to. I raised up the bottom of the ship's wheel with some tumbling tower blocks. You can see them here. And now I'm going to use a large amount of hot glue and glue all of these handles in the same exact spot as the holes and where those little pegs are. I needed to raise this up because the handles are going to stick out a little bit on the top and on the bottom, and I didn't want them to break off while I was working with them. Now it's time to start painting. I'm going to use my DIY chalk paint, and I'm using this little brush. It's not a chalk paint brush, but it's just really handy to get into all of the cracks and crevices because the bristles are round, so it's all over the place and you can really get into all of the nooks and crannies. So I'm going to give this a couple good coats of my DIY white chalk paint, which is just some talc and a regular latex house paint. I've got the recipe down in my description box if you're interested. And this is the back. So I'm going to start with the back, paint this all up, and then I'll flip it over and do the front. I'm using this beautiful coastal blue color from Rust-Oleum. I've just got a little pot of it because I don't use a lot of blue. But I'm decided to do something a little bit different based on the inspiration. I'm going to do the handles blue and the pegs blue instead of they've got the round part blue and then everything else white with some distressing. So I decided just to kind of change things up a little bit. I thought it would look really pretty with some blue handles. So I'm just going to go ahead and paint the one side of these, and then once they're dry, I'll flip them over and paint the other side. Here it is, painted, dry, ready to go. I'm going to be adding this anchor into the center, and I'm just going to freehand it with my pencil first, and then I'll fill it in with my Craft Smart oil-based paint pen in black. Now, I don't have a printer here and I didn't bring my Cricut. So if you have a cutting machine, by all means, go ahead and cut out a stencil if you want. You can also do the printing on regular printer paper and then transferring it with either some black chalk or pencil on the back of it, or graphite paper if you have that. I'm starting off with my thick paint pen. This is the chisel tip, and that will give me the ability to fill things in fairly quickly. One thing you want to remember when you're using these types of pens is you want to have a light touch. If you press too hard, the ink doesn't have an opportunity to flow, so you need to just go very lightly with your touch. Once I get the anchor all done, I'm going to use my fine point Craft Smart paint pen to do the rope. Although the inspiration has a lot of distressing on it, I chose to not distress any of this. I'm going to just hang it and see how I like it this way first, and I can always come back and do some distressing later. So the total cost for my ship's wheel was about $28. That's in comparison to the one on Etsy for $114. I think mine turned out really great. I'm happy with it, and I hope you like it too. My second Look for Less project today is inspired by this nautical lighthouse lantern. It's on Wayfair for $74. I know I can make it for less. I am, however, going to change mine up a little bit. I'm going to just stick with the square bottom instead of the hexagon shape. Hexagon shapes are the bane of my existence. I just really don't like doing them. I could have done it round, but all of the pieces of wood that I'm going to be using for this are square, so I just thought I would make it easier on myself and use this MDF board that I got at Dollarama. They come in a 6-pack for $3.50, so this is a really cheap piece of wood to be able to use. I'm just cutting it with my utility knife and snapping it. You can use Dollar Tree signs for this as well. I wanted this to have a chunky bottom, so I'm taking some of these square dowels. They're a 1/2 inch thick, and I'm going to cut them to size. And then I'm going to glue on another piece of this MDF board, and that will create a nice big chunky bottom for me. I am using my miter shears to cut these. They're a little tough to do, but I go ahead and I flip it over and cut on all 4 sides. Then I flip it the other way, cut it again, and then eventually you can get through thick pieces like this. These dowels are fairly soft, so it's not as difficult as a piece of hardwood. If they were hardwood, I would definitely be using my miter saw. I want this to have a permanent hold, so again, I'm using my Weld Bond glue, and I'm going to glue the dowel pieces right on top of that first MDF board. Then I'll glue the second one right on top of that. I wanted to show you how to make some chunky wood using dollar store items. Not everybody has power tools like I do, and I know I could do this very easily with a bigger piece of wood that was more of a slab, but I wanted to show you some options. So you can also use some tumbling tower blocks if you don't have square dowels. The first block that I created for the bottom is about 6 inches square. I made another one that's about 3 inches square, and I tried to use up all of the little scraps of the dowels that I had cut. So I do have a few little gaps. Again, I'm just using some silicone to fill that in, but I don't want to leave too much excess because that doesn't get sanded down very well. I'm going to use these little wood pieces for the feet of my lantern. And I'm going to use my weld bond glue so it's a permanent hold. Like the inspiration, I wanted to have a second level on the bottom. So this is where I'm using the tumbling tower blocks. These I get from Dollarama. They're a little bit bigger than the ones from Dollar Tree, but if you've got the ones from Dollar Tree, by all means go ahead and use them. I just can never find them at my Dollar Tree anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and just use two all the way around and glue them in place. Again, using the Weld Bond glue, it does give me a little bit of time to work with the pieces and make sure that they're all nice and square. This is a solar lantern that I also picked up at my Dollarama store, and it looks like a Chinese pagoda, but I'm going to flip it upside down, and I'm not going to need this bottom portion, so I'm just taking my side cutters and snipping it off, and then I'll be able to put the lid back on and make it look a little bit more like a lighthouse. It's still going to be square, but that's okay. I'm okay with this look. I think it still turned out great. I'm also going to take off these little nibs because I won't need those, and I want it to be able to sit nice and flush on the wood. I'm using hot glue just in a few spots on the top of the lantern, which is actually the bottom, and I'm going to glue that onto the smaller piece of wood. Using some hot glue, I'll attach the top back onto the bottom section. I would really appreciate it if you could hit the like button. That tells YouTube you like my videos and they promote it more, which helps my channel grow. I'm using these 1/2 inch wooden dowels, and these are the round ones that I picked up at Dollarama. I'm going to use a really good amount of hot glue to place the dowels in, and I'm putting them in a bit of an angle because the top piece is, of course, only a 3 inch square compared to this bottom piece here, which is probably about a 4.5 inch square. As I'm setting them in the glue, I'm just pushing them towards the center a little bit so they have the right angle that I need. Please excuse the mess I have in the background here, but I am working at my cottage right in front of the kitchen sink because there's a nice fluorescent light. I've gone and drilled the 1/2 inch holes into the bottom portion of this top block, and that's going to make it really easy for these dowels to fit in, and so I can glue them in and it'll be nice and straight. I do take this off again and add some weld bond glue, and that makes them really nice and secure. I'm going to make a little railing on the top of the lighthouse. I'm using some tiny square dowels, and then I'll put some crossbars on it using the coffee stir sticks. I've painted the lantern 2 coats of my DIY white chalk paint. And now I'm going to use my dry brush and the Serenity Blue Rust-Oleum chalk paint to distress it and give it more of an aged look, but still with that nautical feel with the blue paint. I'm also going to distress the top of the lantern. It was too hard to get into the bottom portion, so I'm just going to leave that black, but I'm still using the Serenity Blue, and that just gives it sort of a seaworthy aged look. I added some jute rope accents, and for $10, I've got a beautiful nautical lantern instead of paying $74 for the Wayfair one. I hope you enjoyed my 2 nautical projects today. I really had a great time creating them. If you like this kind of content, I would love for you to stick around. Hit that subscribe button. The black arrow will show you exactly where to click. Thank you so much for watching right to the end. I really appreciate your support. Bye for now.